Randy, I know you all know him as the KARE 11 anchor. You may not know that one of his passions in his life is high school football. He and I crossed paths probably 30-some years ago, and tell you what, he is quite a guy. And we're involved now, our association, with his Cancer Foundation, the Randy Shaver Cancer Research and Community Fund, and we're very excited about that. But I guess the coolest thing is that I just call him a friend, and he's kind enough to come here this morning. I was chuckling last night. I'm watching him on the news at 10:30, thinking, okay, he's got to be back at Minnetonka High School at early. So I just appreciate everything, Randy, and thanks for being here.
Randy. The fall of 1975. I'm a junior in high school, and I've made the varsity football team as a starter. And back then at Cedar Rapids Jefferson High School, I played for the legendary coach Jack Fisk, who was a Hall of Fame coach in Iowa. It was a big deal back then to make the varsity as a junior and to play. But I didn't have a great season. I had 0 interceptions leading into the second to last game of the year, and we're at Iowa City High. And we're having like a 500 season. So we're in the game and we're winning by about 4 or 5 points. It's late in the game and they're driving, and I know, because they're somewhat of a passing team, that they're probably going to put the ball up in the air, and they had a couple of really good receivers. So here we go. It's like 3rd and goal from like the 10, and they run a pattern where the guy is behind me, but I've got a beat on the ball and I can see it. And first thought going through my head is, here it is. I'm going to get that first pick of my high school career. I can't wait. So I got a beat on the ball. Here it comes. I see it. I'm about ready to make the play. And somehow, some way, my right thumb gets stuck in the ear hole of my helmet. So as I go up to make the interception, I've got one hand here and one hand here. The ball goes right through my hands. The guy behind me catches it for a touchdown. So now we're losing. I don't know how I did it. I couldn't do it again if I tried. My teammate, the senior safety, who saw it all from this angle, is screaming at me, "What was that? What did you just do? How did you do that?" My defensive back coach, Vern Bradison's on the sidelines, and he's this little tiny guy, pot belly, and he's just waiting for me. And he just chewed me up one side. How in the did you do that? I don't know how I did it, but obviously it led to a touchdown for them. We end up winning the game late on a Dale Crosby short touchdown run, so the bus ride home from Iowa City to Cedar Rapids was okay, and I had a pretty good weekend because we won the game, but Monday morning rolls along and it's film time in the morning. Not only was Jack Fisk a great football coach in the sideline, but he was a Hall of Fame coach with the film projector. So here we're sitting in the morning film, and I'm not really thinking too much about it until we get to the 4th quarter, and then it dawns on me, God, I wonder if he's got that on film. Well, sure enough, here we go. We get to the moment of truth, and it's dark and it's grainy back in the day, but you can kind of see this at the bottom of the screen, and the ball goes in, and of course the place just breaks up. Everybody's laughing, and Jack has turned that projector back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and you kind of see this down below. I thought that was going to be my lasting legacy at Cedar Rapids Jefferson High School. I show up for practice, I grab my helmet, I don't think about it, I run out to practice. They had taped the ear holes of my helmet so thick that it took me about 5 minutes to peel the tape off my helmet. We ended up with a 500 season, and it was disheartening for me, because I had felt like this was a big deal to make the varsity, and then have that be something that everybody passes me in the hall and they do this, like I'm Mr. Moose or something. But I had a coach, Ron Sherm, who was another great coach who pulled me aside, and I had great coaches. And you talk about character and integrity, he pulled me aside, and it's something that I've never forgotten, and it's something that I use when I coach as well. He said, it's easy to have character when you win. Character is really something that comes through when times are tough. And he goes, you know what? For you right now, times are tough. And he goes, everybody's doing this, and they're going to remember that until you make them remember something else. So I never forgot that. I had a really good track season my junior year. I came back and worked really hard this summer, and I had a great senior year. We made it to the state semifinals. We lost to Davenport Central with the great Roger Craig, who played for the 49ers in the state semis. We beat our rival, who had beaten us in the regular season. We finished 9-2. I had 7 interceptions my senior year. I was first team All-State, 4A All-State. I was first team All-Conference. I was first team All-Metro. I was named Co-Athlete of the Year at my high school. And to be honest with you, one of the reasons why I felt like it was that I had such a great year was that conversation, that short conversation that I had with Ron Sherman. It stuck with me, it inspired me, it made me feel like I could do better and that good things would happen if I worked hard. My coaches were really big about working hard, you know, to give it everything you had every day and never give up. So that's kind of my first, I guess, lesson about character and integrity. And I've had those lessons that stuck with me all these years. I'm 54, soon to be 55. And you know what? I don't forget those kind of things. You know, they stick with you. If you wonder how those kind of things stay with you, there's a great book, I don't know if you've read it, called Coach for Life. It's written by Ed Flaherty, who started Rapid Oil Change in Minnesota. He's a multi-millionaire businessman. But Ed played for the 1962 football team in Montana, a high school football team that won the state championship. 37 players on that team, coached by 2 men. And actually, one of the men played for John Gallardi in John Gallardi's early years as a coach, not here, but in his first stint as a coach. And the whole book is about how these men, how those 2 coaches changed the lives of those men. Not just necessarily during that magical year of winning the state championship, but all the way through. Here's how it goes. 1962, they win the state title. They all go their separate ways. And 40 years later, they decide to have a reunion. And they invite these 2 coaches to come to the reunion. And the 2 coaches are very reluctant to go to it because they felt like the players are the ones that earned it. So they sit in the back of the room, and after everybody kind of greets each other, one by one, each of those former players stood up and they talked about those 2 men and how those 2 men changed their life and made a difference in their life because of who they were. The character and the integrity and the tough love, as it was back in the day when you had those kind of coaches. And that's what the book is about. The book has all of these stories of how these men, how these 2 guys changed their life. And I'll give you one story which I think is fabulous. There was a guy on the football team named Greg Steckler. And Greg he played football in like 9th grade and stopped playing because he was a musician. He loved to play music, and he had kind of a band, and they'd go to bars, and he kind of got himself in trouble the summer before his senior year. He got picked up for DWI. Well, back in the day, that's a little bit different than what it is now. And so he shows up, he has to go to court, and his dad goes with him, and the judge is sitting there, and the judge says, I'm going to give you 2 options. You can either go to the workhouse for 3 months, or you can go play football. Because the judge knew if you go play football for those 2 guys, they'll straighten your tail out. And the story goes, the dad leans over to the kid and says, you better go play football. And that's what he did. 155 pounds, he got his tail knocked around for practice, and he was a non-factor basically early in the season for that team. But as time went on, and those coaches kept telling him to stick with it, to work hard, be a part of the team, all of those things that you hear coaches talk about, he started to play near the end and was a contributing member of that football team as they won the state title. Back in that day, to win a letter jacket was a big deal. I mean, when you got a letter jacket in the 1960s, that meant that you were somebody. And so at the banquet at the end of the year, he gets a letter jacket. And he writes and says in this story how that just changed his whole outlook about who he was and what was important and all of those kind of things. So he graduates high school, he goes into the service, he gets out of the service, and now he's trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my life? Well, I love music, so he goes to LA, and he becomes a jingles writer. You know what a jingles writer is? They write like commercials, you know, commercials for songs. And he's terrible at it. 12 years he struggles, and as he writes, near the end of his career, he's lost his house, he lost his wife, his car was repossessed, and he's standing at a bus stop in LA. And he knows that his career is basically done. And there's two girls, this is 1984 by the way, and there's two girls standing at the bus stop. And one girl's telling the other, my dad's gonna kill me. And this conversation between these two girls. Well, he figures out that the one girl is pregnant, and she has to go tell her father that she's pregnant. And as he says, I remember the coach telling me, you know, stick with it, be persistent, don't quit. The harder you work, the luckier you will be. All of these things that those two coaches put into his head. He goes back to his apartment that has no furniture in it whatsoever, and he writes the song, Papa Don't Preach. Well, if you're a Madonna fan, you know that Papa Don't Preach was a huge #1 hit. But he doesn't know who Madonna is, and so he gives the song to his agent. The agent says, well, yeah, there's this girl in LA, but she's busy and she can't record this. So they end up giving it to Madonna. She records it, it's a #1 hit. Now he starts to write music for Chris Isaac and other people, and he becomes this huge songwriter, successful. But he stands up at that reunion and says, that would never have happened had I not stuck with what I love to do, and if it wasn't for those two guys who took me and molded me, my character and my integrity, and taught me to be able to have the perseverance to do what I love to do. I thought it was a great story. I mean, and the whole book is full of those kind of stories. You know, I can stand here and tell you about what it is, why it's important, and for most of you that are going through this right now, it's like my two kids when they were high school age. You know, you're just learning how to live your life. You're learning what's important and what's not. And really, character and integrity are things that you learn from other people, I think. I think you learn those things from the people that are around you every day. Not necessarily your peers, but the people who have had life experiences that can teach you what it's like to have integrity, what it's like to be a man of character. My father was one of those people. He died in 1989. He was a fireman, wasn't a college grad, worked 3 jobs. Never once did I ever hear him complain about having 3 jobs and having to do all of those things in his life to provide for his family. He was always moving forward, always thinking about what's the next thing that I can do to help my family. He was a quiet man. In fact, it's very ironic that I am somewhat of a public speaker because my father was at the other end of the spectrum. You could not get him to stand in front of anybody to speak. But he was kind of the Bud Grant of my life because you knew he meant business. He didn't have to say anything. You could just get that look, and you knew, what he was thinking and how you should be thinking. So that's where I learned it from, and I also learned it from the coaches that I had in my life. I had cancer in 1998, Hodgkin's disease, and 5 months of chemo and a month of radiation, probably the toughest time of my life. The one thing that I thought of as soon as I was diagnosed and started chemo, it's something that Coach Sherman told me back in the day, that you have to be a 6 o'clock player in a 6 o'clock league. And we used to laugh all the time, what does that mean, Sherman? Well, it meant that when your time comes, you have to be ready. No excuses. You have to be ready. And so I used that every time I would go to chemo, every time I'd have radiation, that this is something I have to do. I gotta face it, you know, I gotta handle it. And, you know, I know that athletics was the biggest part of helping me get through that very tough time in my life. But I learned from those guys. I had great role models. And it's really all about how you feel about yourself. I just had a friend of mine leave Channel 11 after 9 years, and a great guy. And I stood up in front of the newsroom to talk about it because they asked me to, and I didn't really talk about what he did for us in the station. You know, I said that, you know, here's a guy that obviously when he came to work, he did a great job for us. But his job does not define who he is. Football players, football doesn't define who you are. Okay? That's something that you do. And as I said that day, what defines us, who we are is the people that we love, the people that love us, and the way that we treat people. That defines us, who we are. That is what character and integrity is all about. Yeah, I may think that the news business is important, but outside of those walls is much more important. And I said that day for him, he gets a chance now to take those values and spend more time with his young family to teach them and be around them and have that opportunity and not have to worry about whether news is breaking and I've got to leave my family to go do that. Football's the same way for you. You know, you have a chance to play football. It's a great opportunity. It's a great way to learn life lessons. But at the end of the day, you're more than just a football player. You know? And you're going to be learning lessons along the way that will stay with you for the rest of your life. Just like that team from 1962. You'll be shocked. I'm standing here, I bet if you asked your fathers who played for coaches, they would tell you, or teachers, or whatever it was, they would tell you that those are things, those are lessons, those are people that have taught them things along the way that help create who they are. I can't think of a group that has a better opportunity to learn from someone than to learn from my friend. There isn't a coach in the state of Minnesota that has the integrity and the character and the ability to show people what it means to live that kind of life like Dave. And I'm not just saying that because I'm standing here. I would tell Dave this if he and I were standing just us somewhere else. That's the kind of respect that I have for him. You talk about a role model. You talk about somebody that can show you how to do that kind of thing in your life. It's sitting right there. It's sitting right there. And if you walk out of this experience and you get nothing out of it, other than that, trust me, that'll be enough. That's all you'll need, is that. I've learned so much from Dave in the last 30 years about football, but I've learned more about Dave in the last 2 years about life than I have from anybody else. And I mean that. He has been unbelievable in this MFCA effort for Tackle Cancer, and stressing how it's so important to do something that's bigger than yourself. That's hard to understand when you're young, but the older you get, you kind of get it. You get it. You understand that, you know, we have an obligation to do something that's bigger than ourselves. So, if I can leave you with anything today, it's that you don't have to look far for the role models in your life to help you be the person you want to be. I'm sure you have great teachers. I'm sure you have unbelievable family members that can do that for you, but you also have an outstanding role model in your head coach. And that should be enough to at least get you off and running, to get you off to a good start. Because that's all we really need, is to get off to a good start. And once you get off to a good start, you'll figure the rest of it out. At least I hope so. I say that with my kids every day. And I do this with my fingers behind my back. If they're going to do the right thing. Because that's really what character is, isn't it? It's doing the right thing, knowing the difference, and then acting on it. So, anyway, if you do anything that I've said here today, other than that, is buy that book. I guarantee you. The name of the book is Coached for Life, written by Ed Flaherty. You can't find it in the bookstore, you gotta go online to buy it. But it'll be well worth your time and your money to read that book. Especially for us dads, to relate to that time, because it brought back so many memories for me of things that I was taught that I now sit there and go, oh yeah, I know what that means. I know how important that is. So, thank you for inviting me here today. I appreciate it very much.
Anybody have any questions? We got a couple minutes before we got to go to class.
Anything? Yeah.
You missed the sports anchors?
I don't miss the sports anchoring as much as I miss covering prep schools. I'm lucky because I get to do football. I love football. And if they took that away from me, I'd probably quit. So I get to keep doing that, but I miss the winter sports in the spring. I love track and field. I'm going to miss covering that kind of stuff. But if you ask me, do I miss going into professional locker rooms and sitting around and waiting for guys to interview that say the same thing in half of the last 30 years? The answer to that would be no. I don't miss that. Don't miss that. Anything else? Yeah?
Predictions for the Vikings draft. Players.
Well, they're going to have to go defense. I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, I know they have a big need of receiver, but I think they're going to go linebacker and probably go defensive line. You know, if you look at the history of the draft, drafting defensive linemen in the first round is always a gamble. You know, it's probably 50-50 whether those guys end up being, you know, great players or not. They've had some success there with Kevin Williams, first round picks, but I think their needs right now are on defense. Hopefully they'll find a way to, they think that the receiver position is pretty deep and that they can get a quality receiver in a second round situation or third round. I mean, I think we all know they need to help bolster that offense for Ponder, but I think defense, they're getting old on the defense, there's no doubt. I mean, if you look at their age situation on defense, they need to make that, you know, a little bit younger and bring in some quality there. So I think that's what you'll see. And they'll probably trade down too. I mean, I think that's kind of Spielman's MO at this point.
How about one more?
Could you tell us quickly about your foundation, your cancer foundation?
Sure. The Randy Shaver Cancer Research and Community Fund's been around for about 7 or 8 years, but my golf event's been around since '95. And the golf event really has been kind of the main way to raise money. We give money to cancer researchers at the University of Minnesota. And it's really, we're kind of a seed money organization. What that means is researchers will come to us. Dave actually sat there in December and saw our process, where they come in and they make presentations. They think they have an idea. They think that if we do this and do this, this might work. And so we give them the money to try. There's a lot of times we'll hit a home run. There's a lot of times that we'll strike out, but you never know until you try. And so 80% of the money that we raise during the course of a year will go to research, or roughly that area. And then 20% goes to cancer patient aid throughout Minnesota, not just in the metro. And we'll do a number of different projects, whether it's grief counseling or music therapy at Northwood Memorial Hospital. We'll do a whole bunch of different things. But all of these people make presentations to us in December requesting X amount of money from us. That's the great thing about our organization. I can tell you exactly where our money goes. You know, when you, no offense to the American Cancer Society or things like that, but you give money to them, I'm not really sure they will be able to tell you exactly where the money goes. We can do that. And we do everything on 10% or less expenses. So 90 cents of every dollar we raise, tackle cancer money, whatever it might be, will go to the charity. And there's very few charities that can do that too. So that's really what we're all about. We try to, somebody's got to do something. Cancer doesn't care who you are. Doesn't care who you love. It doesn't care who loves you. It just doesn't care. And if we stand by and do nothing, it's going to get worse and worse. We've got to do something. And this is kind of our way of doing something. And we think that the more home runs we can hit with those researchers who are absolutely brilliant people, I think Dave will attest to that, unbelievable people, the more we can help them, I think the better chance we may have for our children's children not to have to go through what we have. So, yes?
Who do you got winning it all next year for football in high school?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know, I haven't done any research yet. You tell me about you.
Who I think is going to win it?
Yeah, who do you think?
Obviously us.
Okay. Then I'll go with that for right now till I know a little bit better. I'll quiz Dave a little bit more this summer and kind of get a feel for it.
You got a shot.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I hear you've got a strong class. So that'll be fun. That's what it's all about, right? Working hard right now. Everybody's got a chance to win a state championship now. And it's easy to talk about it, but once August hits, that's when the work really begins. So it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to high school football. I love Friday nights. If you don't love Friday nights, there's something wrong with you. There's nothing more special than Friday nights. And it's hard for people to understand that have never played and why it's so great. And I really can't tell you exactly why. Every time I walk out in the field on Friday night, I still feel like I can play. Not do something like this, but I still feel like I can play. So, thank you very much for having me here. I appreciate it.
Have a great day.